Bhanubhakta Acharya was born as the son of Dhananjaya Acharya and Dharmavati Devi in Ramgarh, Tanahu on 1871 BS. Bhanubhakta's astrological name was Devi Vakta, but Bhanubhakta's father, Dhananjay, is said to have been named him Bhanubhakta as he was born after praying God's son for 12 years. Bhanu means God's son and Bhakta means devotee. The surnames of the Brahmins in Nepal are based on merit and are often based on a particular place. Acharya is the master of reciting mantras or reciting Vedas, the chairperson of Vedic sacrifice, Esekra, or the highest degree in Sanskrit. Though called Acharya, there are two types of Acharya in Nepal: Kaudinya Gotriya Acharya and Garg Gotriya Acharya. Bhanubhakta was Kaudinya Gotriya Brahmin. Since the Sugauli Treaty of 1872 BS, Nepal lost majority of its land to British India government, and there were no schools of any kind in Nepal at that time. Therefore, from the educational point of view, the country was in darkness. Bhanubhakta's Vratavanda took place at the age of 7 in 1878 BS. His grandfather, Sri Krishna Acharya, himself had recited the Gayatri Mantra. After Vratavanda, Bhanubhakta Acharya started reciting Vedas with his grandfather in his own house. At the age of 10, Bhanubhakta was married to Chandrakanta Devi. Chandrakanta Devi died a few months after the marriage. Soon after, he got remarried for the second time at the age of 11 to Chandrakala Devi of Manung village in Tanahu district. Two sons, Ramnath and Sivasankar, and one daughter, Lakshmi, was born from Chandrakala Devi. After that, when he went to Kasi, India with his grandfather in 1886 BS, he stayed there for 5 to 6 years and studied grammar and literature as well as astrology. In the last hour of his grandfather's life, his grandfather Sri Krishna wanted to die in Kasi, India as his last wish, so Bhanubhakta also went with him. Bhanubhakta returned to Nepal at around 1889 BS after his grandfather Sri Krishna left his body at Kasi. After returning from Kasi, Bhanubhakta started his domestic life in 1890 BS. Meanwhile, in 1891 BS, Bhanubhakta met grass cutter Chamu Narayan Pant while he was resting on the bank of Buldi Khola in Burlung Vesi in order to visit his in-laws in Munung village. Bhanubhakta was a young man of 20 years back then. The grass cutter used to cut grass and sell it all day long. The grass cutter had built a well by selling those grass, so that it would make it easier for traveler to drink water. Even now, there is a well in Tanahu built by the grass cutter. Bhanubhakta got impressed by the conversation with grass cutter, and Bhanubhakta thought that he could have made a name for himself in the community by doing something new. Although it is said that the inspiration for the composition came from grass cutter, I believe his inspirational personality came from his grandfather Sri Krishna. At the time of Bhanubhakta's life, the political activity of the country was at critical juncture. On 1896 BS, Vimsen Thapa committed suicide by stabbing himself inside a surveillance room. Bhanubhakta was 25 years old when Vimsen Thapa was killed. On 1902 BS, Mukhtiar Mathur Singh Thapa was assassinated. In 1903 BS, there was a Kot massacre led by Janga Bahadur Rana, and in 1903 BS, Vandarkhal massacre, and on 1904 BS, there was a Lau Parva done by Janga Bahadur Rana. Janga Bahadur Rana killed 100 of his enemies and rose to power and started Rana dynasty. Bhanubhakta Acharya was 32 years old at the time of Vandarkhal massacre, but Bhanubhakta is nowhere to be found writing about such conspiracies and killing in his own country. Bhanubhakta saw the spiritual epic Ramayana written by the great Sanskrit poet Valmiki being read by his grandfather in his own house. This book was, however, written in Sanskrit. Bhanubhakta thought to translate Ramayana written in Sanskrit into Nepali. Many ordinary Nepali people can understand the Ramayana when writing in Nepali. Bhanubhakta started writing this book in Nepali. He not only translated Sanskrit Ramayana into Nepali, but also wrote it in conjunction with Nepali culture. In 1898 BS, he started to write a translation of Ramayana Balkhand. Bhanubhakta got a government job at the age of 37, but his boss took away his job within 2 years. He was then accused of embezzling government funds. In 1911 BS, he was imprisoned in a case at Kumari Chowk jail. This staying in jail became a boon for the writer. While imprisoned there for 5 months, he was able to translate the verse of Ramayana's Ayodhya, Aranya, Sri Kiskinda and Sunder verse. He wrote Uttarkhand in 1915 BS and Yuddhakand in 1919 BS. In 1925 BS, the manuscript of the 7 chapters of Ramayana were combined. Bhanubhakta Acharya is an early representative poet of Nepali literature. He is famous as the translator of Valmiki Ramayana. He has written works like Prasnottar, Bhaktamala, Badhu Siksha, etc. Women's rights activists have accused Bhanubhakta of comparing woman to hell in Prasnottar. Adikavi Bhanubhakta Acharya described woman as the main door of hell and the chain of bondage, which is why feminists do not like him. There was no book printing house during Bhanubhakta's time. Therefore, the Ramayana written by him was not published at the time, but other people started listening and saying the Ramayana he wrote in Nepali. Such work has been done for a long time. Later, the young poet of Nepali literature, Motiram Bhatt, would also listen to the verse of Ramayana. Motiram Bhatt wonders who is the poet of this poem who wrote with such a sweet verse. While searching, Motiram discovered Bhanubhakta Acharya. It was Motiram who identified Bhanubhakta Acharya by writing a biography of Bhanubhakta. Motiram himself searched and published the book of Bhanubhakta. While residing in Kasi, Motiram Bhatt wrote a biographical and critical book of Bhanubhakta in 1948 BS entitled Bhanubhakta's Life Character and adorned it with the title Adikavi. However, the Adikavi written by Motiram did not came into vogue. In 1997 BS, Rana Prime Minister Juddha Samsher finally issues an order saying Bhanubhakta can be called as Adikavi. Only then, Bhanubhakta became known as Adikavi in the history of Nepal. When there was no Ramayana in Nepali language, Puranas were read all over Nepal. At that time, not everyone was allowed to read Sanskrit books. When Bhanubhakta's Ramayana came, Ramayana was kept in everyone's house. In fact, only after people of all castes get equal opportunity to study. And from marriage to any kind of rituals, Bhanubhakta's Ramayana was sung. Before Bhanubhakta, Nepali poet could not present Nepali language and literature in such an easy way, simple and original way. Therefore, the epic Ramayana was called the first epic of Nepali language and literature. Prithvinarayan Saha unified the nation of Nepal. Bhanubhakta culturally integrated the Nepali language into a single chain. Despite his many works, Ramayana immortalized Bhanubhakta, and the same Ramayana also made the Nepali language popular. Due to his tireless effort, the Ramayana written in Sanskrit was translated into Nepali. In Bhanubhakta's poetic journey of almost 3 decades, he has created an epic, 4 poems and more than 3 dozen minor poems, which have enriched the creative tradition of Nepali literature at that time. He died on 1925 BS at the age of 54 in Setighat, Tanahu. He is called Adikavi as he was one of the earliest poets of Nepali literature. Thank you.